we like to look at other people through a lens that we can relate to, right? Oh, that reminds me of my Uncle Jimmy, right? That reminds me of my Uncle Jimmy. My Uncle Jimmy was like that, always talking about the past. It reminds me of no. And I mean this in regards to Michael Jordan coming off of The Last Dance. There are people that are pushing back against Jordan saying, why is he doing this? Marcellus Wiley joined us. Why is Jordan? It should be just all positivity. What? Excuse me? Would anybody ever watch that? An all positivity look back at a championship team would be the worst documentary and least representative documentary of the time. Do I think The Last Dance was perfect? I don't. There was some flaws to it. Some of the episodes kind of meandered around. Some of the backstories weren't told. It would have been interesting to me. Karl Malone and John Stockton were both on the Dream Team. They did talk to Stockton about the finals, but when talking about the Dream Team, those two were never brought up. Did those three establish a relationship, or four establish a relationship during the Dream Team? How did that play out? If everything is backstory, so that we understand all that's going into the 98. That's how I read it. Well, there were certain backstories that were important that weren't told. And there were certain ones that weren't important that were told. It was a mix of a Michael Jordan documentary with a Bulls explanation documentary, where you got backstories on some of the important pieces. So I look at this thing and I'm like, wow, that was kind of a mixed bag there. Was it perfect? No. Part of it is the guy who possessed the rights to use that footage happened to be the greatest player of all time. Gets a little tricky. Now, could Jordan have said, hey, I'll do all your interviews. I don't want any creative control. You do what you want with it? Yeah, he could have. But have you ever watched the show Billions? The very first episode? What does Bobby Axelrod say? What's the point of having FU money if every once in a while you don't say FU? What's the point of holding on to that footage and the rights of that footage for over 20 years if you're not going to use some of your power and influence so that, you don't talk about everything that you don't want to talk about? They talked about Jordan's gambling. We may not have liked what the answer or how they came at, but they talked about it. Talked about Jordan quitting and playing baseball. I thought it was kind of laughable that they tried to put some, heart on the to dot an I with. He hit over 200. It was amazing. No, it really wasn't. He wasn't good. There's a bunch that goes into it, but let's just kind of take a breath here and go, okay. Did you enjoy watching it? Yes. Did you learn something? Yes. Did they talk about all of the major stuff with the team? Yes, yes, and yes. I can't believe Jordan would act that way or talk that way or treat his teammates that way. You know why you don't understand that? Because you are not wired like one of the great athletes of all time. And that doesn't mean it's the only way. Tim Duncan is not Jason Kidd, is not Kobe Bryant, is not LeBron James, they're not. But when we try to psychoanalyze all of these people and make them relatable to you and me, what we're missing is that dude is a killer. He's almost deranged in his desire to win games. Deranged. It reminds me of the old fable of the scorpion and the frog. Scorpion can't swim, right? So he needs to get to the other side. He asks the frog, can I hop on your back and you swim across? The frog looks at him and says, but you'll sting me. You'll kill me. And if you sting, and the scorpion says, hold on, I just want to ride. If I sting and kill you, we'll both die. So the frog thinks about it for a second and says, it's a good point. It's a good point. Hop on. Halfway between one shoreline and the next, the scorpion stings the frog. And the frog turns around and says, well, why would you do that? As they both are about to perish. The scorpions can't swim, and the frog was going to die. And the scorpion replies, I couldn't help it. It's in my nature. I'm a scorpion. We want Michael Jordan to be something that he's not. We want him to be a guy that sits there and goes, that wasn't the right way. Can't believe I acted that way. I wish I would have had greater balance. But one, he won all the time. So why would he do it any differently? He's crazy successful, crazy respected. His brand is synonymous with sport and championships and basketball. He's worth more than the owner of the Chicago Bulls, and he owns his own basketball team. You're asking Michael Jordan, essentially a scorpion, to be something that he's not. He can't. Can't. And frankly, we want Karl Malone. Like, I heard Karl Malone talking, and I was like, man, that's a little off. That's a little weird. Take a listen.
So when I say the name Michael Jordan, what comes to mind?
Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan.
Well,
what else I need to say? Thank you. Go ahead.
So talk to me about the Game 6 finals in Utah when he stole the ball.
Why? Why do I have to? But I tell you this, I'm all man, and I accept the responsibility for not winning one, and we was there. We just happened to be playing the Chicago Bulls, which wasn't just Michael Jordan, by the way. And I have the utmost respect for Michael, but I never thought I was playing Michael Jordan. I was playing the Chicago Bulls. Everybody say this person was a bad man and all that. Well, yes, I give them respect. I'm a man, and I was a bad too. So that's how I look at that, and that's who I am. Maybe in my older years, I can call it that bluntly, but I'm just calling it like I see it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's part of that which I totally get. Look, he was a badass. I was a badass. I'm okay saying that. I wish I would have won. I take responsibility. I mean, I understand what he's saying. Don't you just wish he could have been more, like, he says about being straightforward. I wish he would have been actually more understandable, relatable to me. But then I think back and I think, well, Karl Malone was wired as a guy who thought he could score on anybody, thought he was a badass. Was, in fact, he's the second all-time leading scorer in the history of the NBA. Asking him to act a different way when this is what he had achieved such professional success with is laughable. You're asking a scorpion to be something that he's not. You're asking him to bend the knee and bow down to Michael Jordan, and that is not in his nature. It's just not. It by the way, Paul Pierce has caused quite an uproar because he didn't have him as one of the top 5 players of all time. Now, Paul Pierce has caused quite an uproar because he didn't have LeBron James listed as one of the 5 best players of all time. I can tell you that there are a lot of former NBA players and some current NBA players, but former NBA players like, he's just not wired like those other guys. Yes, Larry Bird loved to pass, was a great passer. But Larry Bird was a ferocious trash talker and wanted the ball and wanted the responsibility of making all the big plays at the right moment. While LeBron's block is the greatest maybe defensive play in the history over Andre Iguodala, in the history of the NBA Finals, the greatest defensive play in NBA playoffs history is probably Larry Bird stealing the ball that Isaiah Thomas inbounded. They were going to lose at home. The Pistons were going to beat them in Boston Garden. They were going to lose the series, and Bird stole the ball and passed to DJ, who laid the ball in. Bird was unrelatable. Bird was slightly aloof. Bird was of the same ilk, like a psychotic killer of a winner as Kobe as Jordan, but not as LeBron. So I don't like I do think there's some personal animus there for Paul Pierce, who, by the way, is also wired like those guys. But we're asking Paul Pierce to turn off his competitive gene, a guy he thought he was better than, whether he was or wasn't, it doesn't matter. Like, you're talking to Paul Pierce, who, like, look, I've played against him. I think I'm better than him. I don't think he's one of the 5 greatest players of all time. Like, we're asking Paul Pierce to be something he's not. If you're that type of competitor your entire life, then all of a sudden you're supposed to turn off the competitive juices so you can analyze players, many of whom you've never seen play. That's not going to happen. We're asking Scorpions to be something that they're not. And as the Frog learned, Scorpion's a scorpion.